all taught that everything about you, it makes you unique and different from everybody else. And if you have a different preference than someone, or a different, you align a certain way with a certain idea, that makes you different from someone else, and then you can't, it's almost like a cult mentality. Like you're not allowed to talk to this person because they don't agree with you on certain ideas.
Yeah.
Whereas we should all be talking to each other about all of our ideas, and if we disagree on something, there's a reason. So we need to discuss that with each other until we figure out how, until we work that out. What are we going to talk about today? We haven't even discussed anything.
What have you guys been talking about in general? Anything in the news or shit like that that's interesting for you?
What about the Dow?
The Dow.
The Dow Jones or the Dow, like the all-encompassing yin and yang.
That might be more interesting, actually. So,
that's the Tao.
Yeah, it's Tao. Yeah.
I knew where you were going. We were on the same page. I was like, oh yeah.
I was like, fuck it, maybe the Dow is a thing. I don't know.
No, it is. Thou shalt not steal.
But they do, right?
That's true.
I was thinking about that today. Like, in our society, if we're a democracy, economically, we have no say so at all. And it's sort of it's kind of bizarre. The largest corporations are sort of on a welfare system where they can't fail.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
Are the largest corporations on a welfare system where they can't fail because they're publicly traded and their failure would equal the loss of billions, if not trillions of dollars for their investors?
Well, I think they control the regulation.
Well, I agree with that. But I'm saying,
are
they too big to fail because they're not private companies and they're owned publicly?
Well, I think if one of those big companies failed, I think it would open up an opportunity for a lot of smaller companies.
I think it happens. I'm just wondering if sometimes we complain about the bailouts for some of these companies, but those companies are publicly traded, and those bailouts, while they do proportionately help the richest of the rich, it still keeps the mom and pop's investor from losing their money too if they're invested in that same company.
I don't think so, because I think those larger companies just buy up all the companies. So the larger companies continue to grow, while the smaller company, even some of the larger companies that aren't as big as the larger versions of those companies, will get purchased by those companies or acquired. Yeah,
eventually. I don't know. So I think America's for sale. Like I think everything in America, from land to stock to businesses to opportunity, it's all for sale. And so I have a different. I do agree that you have a very few that are extremely powerful, and mainly there's these no individually owned or corporations that are massively large and massively powerful. But for the most part, I also feel like there's some level of brainwash that takes place to all of us, and I have to be careful. I'm not subject to it as well from time to time, but we're brainwashed into becoming consumers instead of becoming buyers, right?
Yeah.
For me, literally there's not a thing in this world that you can't go buy. Right. And if you wanted, most companies are publicly held companies. So if you feel like that company is going to be around in the next decade or 20 or 30 years and are doing something great, you can be a part of that. And so you can share in the success of that company. And so I like that part of it. But I also see the nefarious part that you're talking about, that, where these corporations get so big and they get all this preferential treatment. And the only thing I'm wondering is that because to do otherwise would cause so much harm to so many individuals that it would be unpopular, and so these politicians, in a self-serving way, want to keep from doing unpopular things, even though they may be the right things. Like letting a company fail that makes bad decisions is, in my book, is the right call. But they may make some type of argument about the greater good, and they save these companies that make poor decisions, and you wonder, can they save them forever, or is it just a temporary thing, right?
Yeah, I think. My biggest concern with all of it is if you go back a few decades, like back in the 80s, maybe, a person could buy a home for maybe 2 or 3 years of salary, like a 3-bedroom, 2-bath home, like a single family home, a decent sized house, and typical lower middle class family would be able to afford something like that, just blue collar. They work in a manufacturing company or something like that. But now that's not even close to the case. The housing prices have gone up so much. The prices of everything have gone up so much. There's a thing in the corporate world where, especially with publicly traded companies, where they expect a higher bottom line every year.
Agree.
Or every quarter, really. I feel like that's a trap. And I think maybe not a trap, but I feel like it's detrimental to our society in the long run, because especially when they're just raising prices just to get a higher bottom line instead of there's a difference between expanding and growth and then just raising the cost or raising your prices and increasing your margins to increase your profitability. And also with the size of these companies, I think our monopoly laws should be more strict. I think they should be based on per capita. So I think we should restrict the size of any bureaucracy or corporation, because if you and I grew a company that reached that scale and it was public, we no longer control that thing. It becomes something else, and we can still make a fortune from it. And you should still be able to do that. There's nothing. I don't have the whole wealth inequality thing. I think is a distraction, because we're a rich society and there's no limit to how successful an individual can be. So there's going to be a wealth inequality or a wealth separation. But my fear is that this is the first time in my lifetime where it seems like the lower class may be growing. I just see a lot more homeless people now than I used to, and things like that, and that really concerns me. Because you don't want a large lower class. You really don't want a lower class at all. We'd have a more productive, more wealthy society if we didn't have a lower class, if we eliminated that lower class. But I just feel like there's no bottom-up regulation in the society. It's all top-down, and it's becoming really top-heavy. And I think that's part of the problem. And our regulators are all corrupted by these corporations that are really making all the rules. So I don't know, how long can that last? Or what happens? What does that look like in 10 years or 20 years?
I think it lasts forever. On some level, I think it does. So I watched Elysium the other day. I think that's what it's called.
That's a good one.
Elysium, yeah.
Yeah, Elysium, yeah. So, and it kind of touches on this, but essentially, this world's failing and polluted and this and that, and so they build a big ring in the sky. I'm using the wrong terms, but the wealthiest of the wealthy go there, and on Elysium there's no, you can live an extended period of time, and you get in a machine, you can fix anything, you can cure pretty much any disease or any bone break or anything almost instantly, and but yet the people down on Earth have got old technology and death and famine and disease, and they're poor, and so you think about that and you wonder. So at some point, I do think we'll hit a point from a technology point of view that many of the issues that plague the world now can be solved through technology.
Sure. Yeah.
And I think that they become so widely available that cost is irrelevant, because it should be, at that point, it probably becomes free, right?
It'd have to be
to do those things. Yeah. But I still wonder if there's not some power dynamic that's going to be in place that will remain that way, and because on some level there's going to have to be some barter system, some sort of an exchange, and as long as you have that, there's always going to be people that, maybe I like to collect artwork, maybe I like to collect money, maybe I like to collect power, right? There's always going to be those dynamics. Until you remove these social dynamics and people's motivation to accomplish those things, I just don't know how you get rid of those completely.
Yeah, I don't think.
Can we make things better? I think so.
Yeah, I don't think we need I don't like the idea of distribution of wealth. I feel like that's a dangerous path to go down. But I do like the idea of distribution of power, because I think.
And do you like that as long as it does what you want, or do you like that even if it's doing what you don't want it to do?
Well, I think we create the construct, so I think we have to make sure that whatever we do, it's not.
What if the people in power think that you should be enslaved?
Well, then obviously that's a problem,
right? So, like, we want people, we want distribution of power as long as it's for a result that we want.
But not even distribution of power, maybe separation of power, or
more checks and
delusion
balances.
of power. Yeah.
So this is a completely it ties into this and it doesn't. This is just an example of two of the things we're talking about. So I think everybody out there is familiar with Ferrari. But the founder of Ferrari was interesting. We'll just leave it at that. And he had some thoughts about
Enzo Ferrari.
And he had some thoughts about other people, and he was a very wealthy man, and he made decisions based on what he wanted, not what was profitable, right? And Ferrari, as long as it was a private company, really followed Enzo's methodology and his beliefs. And, they said things like they would never have an electric vehicle. They would never do an SUV. They would never, there's all these things they would never do, right?
Yeah.
This interesting thing happened when Ferrari went public and became a publicly traded company. All of a sudden, they started doing things that were against what that private owner said that what his vision for the company was.
Same thing with Porsche.
Yeah, they started doing things based on the bottom line and based on what you were talking about, those returns to those investors, because now it's performance based, right? Now, technically, when you see, there's this other part you miss, or we miss, and society misses, that if I manage a publicly traded company, I have a duty to my investors, a duty to those stockholders to perform. And I don't remember the exact term, but essentially it's I've got to get the highest and best use, and I have to make decisions that do that, or I can be personally liable.
Yeah.
Well, the problem is that we have such a sue-heavy society that we're an individual to say that the reason we didn't do this is because I want to stay true to this brand and stay true to the memory of Enzo. They could have opened themselves up to personal liability because they're not doing what's in the best interest of the shareholder.
Right.
So we've also created a system where the rules, if the people in charge don't follow them and don't try to make profit at all costs, they can be sued. They can be liable. They get fired.
That's where the legislature comes in.
No, I agree.
It's their role to regulate these corporations because they make the rules for the corporations. But if they're corrupted by the corporations, no one's making any rules.
Well, I think what I'm saying is the rules for the corporations, the way they're set up now, is that they have to do what's in the best interest of the investor.
Yeah, because it's always in favor of the corporation.
Well, that's not in favor of the corporation. That's in favor of the shareholders.
Yes, it's in favor of the most profitability, which is it's fine if that's the rule of the corporation though. That's the guidelines the corporation has to follow based on being a publicly traded company. They have to make sure that all their decisions are in the best interest of their investors or their shareholders. Right. But it's the legislature's responsibility to make sure that these corporations are being ethical and they're not harming society.
Right.
But when the legislators are all corrupted by these corporations, they do whatever the corporations want them to do. They legislate laws that fall in line with whatever best is in the best interest of the corporation instead of the best interest of the American people.
Sometimes
of the society.
Sometimes I've worried about this too. So there are some things that I. So, by the way, Ferrari now is making an SUV. They call it an FUV.
Yeah.
But
real quick,
pure Sange. But go ahead.
Before we get off that topic, too, that's why Elon Musk didn't take SpaceX public.
Yeah,
because he couldn't do the things he wanted to do if he was public.
So in line with that, you start talking about everybody wants to. I feel like we villainize the corporation, but
the corporation's a mindless entity,
right? And that's what I was getting at. But if we think about something, and let's just talk about. So for me, as a business owner, there's tax incentives, and some people don't like tax incentives. But what tax incentives do is they tell people that are generating money what to do with the money. It encourages a certain behavior, so that people with money will redistribute that money back out. So one of the things that and it's designed for contractors, right? For people that drive trucks, people that carry. So you have a weighted vehicle requirement in the United States that if a vehicle is over a certain amount of weight, that you can write the entire vehicle off as a business purchase, right?
Yeah.
So there's this interesting thing here that I was thinking about, and actually this morning on the way in, all vehicles now to meet that are weighted. They literally add weight to these vehicles because the technology, because metal has gotten lighter, because using carbon fiber, using these other things, because technology has advanced faster than the lobbyists and the lobbying firms and the legislation has changed. they're unwilling to lower the weight amount because it'll affect more people would get the tax deduction, right?
Well, really, that tax deduction should apply to all vehicles.
I agree.
And any company.
But it doesn't.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense.
And so you say,
law.
well, hey, are we doing what's best? It's the legislation's responsibility to make sure these companies do what's best. But the reality is the legislation is standing in the way. We are literally weighting down vehicles, which is increasing the usage of gas, which is there's all these things. You have heavier vehicles causing more damage and wrecks. We've got this weighted down. I mean, you're talking about millions of vehicles that are weighted down. How much gas would be saved alone just in the United States?
Yeah. And
they're having to add weight to meet a requirement to get a tax savings.
But is it okay? Also, you could also look at it this way, though. At the same time, these vehicles use more fuel. The oil companies have a lot of power. They want people using as much fuel as possible. Also, the vehicle manufacturers sell a lot of trucks and heavy-weighted vehicles. And they probably make a lot of money on those vehicles.
No, they definitely do. But what I'm saying is if you're talking about a social responsibility, I'm saying it's not just there are problems like this that affect more than just the business. Like,
it affects all of us.
Why are we adding weight? Like, literally, the car that's built in another country is built and it's 1,000 pounds lighter.
Yes.
But you send it to America and
add weight.
We have to add weight to it so that it gets the tax benefit.
Yeah, you put lead weights in it. Yeah.
That makes no sense.
No, it's dumb.
Right? Like, so they're not doing it in the other countries because there's not a profit reason behind it. They're doing it in this country because of taxes.
Yes.
So I feel like the other problem is we have archaic legislation, and we have you have a divided house that is so bent on there is no compromise. And compromise should be that everyone's a little bit unhappy with the deal, right? Like, we have these points that are really important to us, and let's say you're on the other side and you have points that are really important to you, and I'm going to give some and you're going to give some, and neither one of us is going to be completely happy, and that's a good deal, right? Everybody, we're working towards a greater good, and everybody should get some wins. You shouldn't get everything you want, but we should be able to accomplish most of the stuff, right? Yeah. And I feel like that this process has become so politically divided that nothing is getting done, and you got things like this that most of these laws are archaic, and the technology is growing exponentially, and there's no way they can keep up.
But also, there's no interest in, from a legislature perspective, legislative perspective, there's no interest in what the people of the society want. There's only an interest in what the corporations want, or the people that control these corporations. There are some oligarchs in our society, some super wealthy billionaires, like the guy that's the CEO.
There's also the people that don't want to do things on purpose because it would benefit wealthy people. It would benefit everybody, but it would also benefit wealthy people, so they don't want to do it.
Yeah, but I think a lot of when you see politicians,
that's the ones that don't want the weight reduced. By the way, they don't want the weight reduced because they think it'll encourage wealthy people to buy more cars and class them as business vehicles when they're not, and so they want to keep this weight requirement because they think it's going to be solely like F-250s and larger.
Maybe, but I see a lot of politicians usually when a politician will have an idea, or they'll have a position a stance they take on some issue, and then they may even write legislation to say that that's what they're going to do.
Right.
But it's intentionally not going to happen. Like it's they've already got the other someone on the other side already has the thing that's going to take it out, and they know that, and it's all smoke and mirrors.
I agree with that.
And
there's a lot of that.
And if there's a politician that doesn't want the weight removed or the weight restrictions removed from vehicles for tax purposes, I guarantee it's not because it's going to help the American people, or because it's going to help rich people. It's probably based on something that the lobbyists they deal with have told them that some big corporation wants.
Yeah.
And I don't know that. I mean, there may be a couple of decent politicians, but you don't hear from them. They don't have any power.
Yeah.
Because you see the system. It's so divided now. It's and intentionally that way. Even the elections are designed where we only get the most extreme of each side. You don't you don't really have an opportunity to have independent-minded people in office.
Right.
And I think that's intentional. It's division. And I think on the political side, a lot of the division is just an illusion. It's like they're pretending to be enemies when they're all working for the same team. But
and we see that directly. I mean, we see that.
We've seen it, for years.
Vehemently opposing people, and then breaking bread with them over lunch. And
they'll work together.
They're best friends. Yeah,
it's
they've been friends for 20 years.
Yeah, it's all a ruse. But
yeah,
but in the society, they've got us all divided too. And it's to me, I'm seeing our society become more and more divided, where it's almost like you start to lose.
Yeah.
Like the people in the society are almost losing touch with each other. Like they're, and even that's one thing about technology that's, I think, a good thing and can be a negative thing. Is it's technology is naturally what's the word? Decentralizing. So technology naturally decentralizes things. We see a lot in the entertainment industry, and I'm hopeful it'll do that in the corporate world too. And I think it probably is. But now we have so many different types of content to consume as a society. It's like you may be watching a show that I've never even heard of. And then, Eric's probably watching another show that I haven't heard of, and Seth's probably watching a show that I haven't heard of, and listening to different artists that none of us have heard of. And eventually, the pockets of people, it used to, there was like 3 or 4 channels, and there were only a few different companies that produced films and music and stuff. So everybody kind of shared these things as a culture, right? These were all cultural things that we all could talk about together and consume together and appreciate together. And now that is, it's very dispersed and divided. And that's not necessarily a problem. I think that's probably a good thing ultimately. But when I think the division that is a problem is where we're all taught that everything about you, it makes you unique and different from everybody else. And if you have a different preference than someone, or a different, you align a certain way with a certain idea, that makes you different from someone else. And then you can't, it's almost like a cult mentality. Like you're not allowed to talk to this person because they don't agree with you on certain ideas.
Yeah.
Whereas we should all be talking to each other about all of our ideas. And if we disagree on something, there's a reason. So we need to discuss that with each other until we figure out, how till we work that out, work out that reason. And that's one thing about social media that I don't like is I don't like the when people are hyper aggressive on social media and they're putting each other down and stuff like that. And I think it would be cool to have maybe we should talk about this, but to have a social media platform where it encourages conversation with different opinions and different views, but in a amicable style. So like we encourage people that have opposing views to have conversations with each other, but you can't put each other down. You can't cuss at each other.
Right.
You can't over talk each other. You just have to discuss this issue until you come to an agreement on it, and it might take a long time. But that's a real conversation, So and that way, both people and all the people that are watching this conversation and the other people that are probably a part of this conversation are increasing their perspectives too, and changing their perspectives and hopefully gaining different perspectives. And some people have really crazy ideas, but even the people that have really crazy ideas, you still want to hear those ideas and see why they feel that way and where that person's coming from, what happened to them in their life, what have they experienced, why do they feel this way? Some people are just crazy, but most people are not.
Yeah.
But in today's society, it's easy to sort of feel like the whole society is almost schizophrenic.
It can be. It definitely can feel that way.
Yeah. I hope you guys enjoyed the episode. If you did, be sure to like and subscribe. We'll see you next week.
Later, guys.
Bye, guys.
Bye.